You might be racist if you believe in math, science, are white, or just watching this video. Hey guys, my name is Jason Wesley and this is not a podcast. Okay, so before we really dive into all the ridiculousness going on in the world today, I want to show you this quick video of former Secretary of State of the United States, Condoleezza Rice, on race.
It sure doesn't feel worse than when I grew up in Jim Crow, Alabama. Okay, so let's drop this notion that we're worse at race relations today than we were in the past. Really, that means we've made no progress. Really, and so I think the hyperbole about how much worse it is isn't doing us any good. We still have, this country is never going to be colorblind. We had the initial original sin of slavery. It's still with us. And it's with us in a lot of ways, some of them obvious and some of them not so obvious.
You don't think the pot is stirring up a little more?
Oh, the pot may be stirring a little more today than it was a few years ago, but it's certainly not stirring in the way that it was in 1954 when I was born. It's not stirring in the way that my grandparents faced.
An article from CNN contributor Amy Rowlands wrote, "Math is racist, how data is driving inequality." Some that support this ideology literally don't believe that 2 plus 2 is 4. Brittany Marshall is a, quote, teacher and PhD student with a BLM email that has a specialization in mathematics education. She tweeted, "The idea of 2 plus 2 equaling 4 is cultural, and because of Western imperialism, colonization, we think of it as the only way of knowing." Never mind that the Arabic numeral system that we currently use today is not Western. Although the Hindu Arabic numeral system was developed by Indian mathematicians around 500 AD, quite different forms for the digits were used initially. They were modified into Arabic numerals later in North Africa. It was in the Algerian city of Béjaïa that the Italian scholar Fibonacci first encountered the numerals. His work was crucial in making them known throughout Europe. European trade, books, and colonialism helped popularize the adoption of Arabic numerals around the world. But back to the CNN article. In the article, she talks about a book by Cathy O'Neil called Weapons of Math Destruction. Weapons of Math Destruction is a 2016 American book about the societal impact of algorithms. It explores how some big data algorithms are increasingly used in ways that reinforce pre-existing inequality. Now, many times this ideology interchangeably uses inequity and inequality, but I don't think that she was talking about algorithms that censor and downgrade content by conservative voices though. But yeah, algorithms. A procedure for solving a mathematical problem in a finite number of steps that frequently involves repetition of an operation. Broadly, a step-by-step procedure for solving a problem or accomplishing some end. So it appears that she would have to show that the algorithm itself was designed with the intended purpose of creating disparate results based on race and not based on a particular result. So rather than say that the algorithm reinforces pre-existing inequality, therefore calling the algorithm or math racist, logically she would have to show that the intent was for the result to end in inequality based on race. For example, let's say that I'm a business that's a lender. I loan out money. I need to have measures in place that would give me the highest probability that my money would be returned within a certain amount of time with interest. So how do I come up with those measures? Now, if race is a reason in 2021, that's illegal. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act, ECOA, prohibits creditors from discriminating against credit applicants on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, sex, marital status, age, because an applicant receives income from a public assistance program, or because an applicant has in good faith exercised any right under the Consumer Credit Protection Act. The models O'Neil writes about all use proxies for what they're actually trying to measure. The police analyze zip codes to deploy officers. Employers use credit scores to gauge responsibility. Payday lenders assess grammar to determine creditworthiness. But zip codes are also a stand-in for race, credit scores for wealth, and poor grammar for immigrants. So let's start with zip codes being a stand-in for race. Maybe O'Neil needs to investigate policing a little bit more and understand what hotspot policing is. According to the Center for Evidence-Based Crime Policy, over the past 2 decades, a series of rigorous evaluations have suggested that police can be effective in addressing crime and disorder when they focus on small units of geography with high rates of crime. These areas are typically referred to as hotspots, and policing strategies and tactics focused on these areas are usually referred to as hotspot policing or place-based policing. A National Academy of Sciences panel concluded, studies that focused on police resources in crime hotspots provide the strongest collective evidence of police effectiveness that is now available. On the basis of a series of randomized experimental studies, we conclude that the practice described as hotspots policing is effective in reducing crime and disorder and can achieve these reductions without significant displacement of crime control benefits. Indeed, the research evidence suggests that the diffusion of crime control benefits to areas surrounding treated hotspots is strong stronger than any displacement outcome. So no, zip codes are not a stand-in for race. But what about credit scores being a stand-in for wealth? Employers who run credit checks cannot see your credit score. The report they receive includes information that contributes to your score, like payment history, and frequent late payments could be a cause for concern. But the 3-digit credit number is not included. So why do they check your credit report anyway? Is it to weed out the white people from the black people? More than half of employers conduct background checks during the hiring process only, and the number one reason at 86% is to protect their employees and customers, says a 2018 HR.com report. For security purposes, the credit report can be used to verify someone's identity, background, and education, to prevent theft or embezzlement, and to see the candidate's previous employers, especially if there is missing employment experience on a resume. Which, don't lie, half of you have embellished on a resume. How do I know? According to a 2014 survey by CareerBuilder.com, 58% of hiring managers said they've caught a lie on a resume. Anyways, back to the credit reports. For employers, it's a big picture snapshot of how a potential candidate handles their responsibilities. Credit reports indicate whether or not you're responsible, and they also indicate if you're in financial distress. These are attributes that are important to employers. For example, would you want to hire someone in your accounting department who can't manage their own obligations? So if employers were looking at credit scores, I don't really see why that would be important, but a credit report is something totally different and makes much more sense. So she was incorrect about the differentiation between credit score and credit report, which was the foundation of her argument. The last foundational argument she used was to prove that math was racist, was poor grammar is a stand-in for immigrants. Now, you don't have to be an immigrant to have poor grammar, and I know plenty of American citizens that have poor grammar.
Catch me outside, how about that?
Catch you outside? What does that mean?
What I just said.
But if you can't speak clearly and concise and grammatically correct in the language predominantly used by my clientele, I'm probably not going to hire for my company to be a customer service rep, editor, teacher, or trainer for my company. Many companies in Los Angeles hire people that speak Spanish because a large number of their clientele speak Spanish. But even if the applicant has poor grammar in other languages, they still might not be hired. And speaking of being hired, if you're hired by Coca-Cola, you might have to go through anti-white training. This training is from Robin DiAngelo and her, in my opinion, terrible cultish book, White Fragility, where she believes that only white people can be racist. In the book, DiAngelo says that all white people are invested in and collude with racism, and that I believe that the white collective fundamentally hates blackness for what it reminds us of, that we are capable and guilty of perpetrating immeasurable harm, and that our gains come through the subjugation of others. We have a particular hatred for uppity blacks, those who dare step out of their place and look us in the eye as equals. That's what she believes. She said that we have a particular hatred for uppity blacks who dare step out of their place and look us in the eye as equals. That's not a white people issue, Robin. That's a you issue and other racists like you. She also says, a person of color may refuse to wait on me if I enter a shop, but people of color cannot pass legislation that prohibits me and everyone like me from buying a home in a certain neighborhood. I guess she and other people like her have never heard of the Fair Housing Act in 1968. The Fair Housing Act is a federal law enacted in 1968 that prohibits discrimination in the purchase, sale, rental, or financing of housing, private or public, based on race, skin color, sex, nationality, or religion. Maybe she's just ignorant to the Community Reinvestment Act. The CRA was passed to reverse the urban blight that had become evident in many American cities by the 1970s. In particular, one goal was to reverse the effects of redlining, a decades-long practice by which the federal government and banks had actively discouraged and avoided making loans to lower income and minority neighborhoods. But this less attractive Sigourney Weaver lookalike is making tens of thousands of dollars from these corporations spreading this idiocy. This has led a growing number of liberal white women to post videos on social media like this.
If you're white, yes, you are racist. Even if you think you're woke, we all benefit from oppression. Pretending you're not racist only makes racism grow.
If you don't believe that there is white privilege, please don't teach. If you don't believe that Black Lives Matter, please don't teach. If you don't believe in systemic racism and how it negatively impacts our students of color and don't want to help dismantle those systems, please don't teach.
Other liberal white women are paying to confront their privilege and racism at dinners costing $2,500 a plate, utilizing the book White Fragility. Listen, you can come over to my house and I will make you dinner and call you a racist all night if you pay me $2,500 a plate. Brown read White Fragility, a book released last year that posits every person partakes to some degree in racism and needs to confront that and realize many of the things she was commending herself for needed to be reevaluated. The book is now assigned reading for women before they can attend a dinner. dinner. This hate-filled racist ideology leads to an opinion columnist for American University's student newspaper comparing the large influx of predominantly affluent white students to an invasion species, as in settler colonialism. What if a white person said a group of black people were an invasive species in 2021? Now, I'm not even going to get into how white people not being a species and her lack of knowledge about what a Homo sapien is, but it leads youth to finding out revisionist history and other ignorant people online and schools teaching the 8 white identities. New York school encourages parents to become white traitors and white abolitionists. So not the abolition of an actual crime, evil, or action, but encouraging parents of children to abolish a group of people based on race. I mean, that doesn't sound racist or genocidal at all. The principal of East Side Community School in New York sent white parents this tool for action, which tells them they must become white traitors and then advocate for full white abolition. Now imagine if this was a teacher sending all black parents a tool for action about how to abolish Black Lives Matter. Now this would probably come off as white supremacist. The 8 white identities are white supremacist, white voyeurism, white privilege, white benefit, white confessional, white critical, white traitor, and white abolitionist. It's about time we build an ethnography of whiteness, since white people have been the ones writing about and governing others. For the sake of time, let's just talk about white traitor and white abolitionist. Actively refuses complicity, names what's going on. Intention is to subvert white authority and tell the truth at whatever cost. Need them to dismantle institutions. Listen, I'm all for the truth and seeking truth, but this is not what it's seeking. It's the last part of that, which is to dismantle institutions. A white abolitionist is changing institutions, dismantling whiteness, and not allowing whiteness to reassert itself. Now this sounds a lot like racism, and I'm not talking about the redefining of racism by David Wellman as discussed in White Fragility, where he summarizes racism as a system of advantage based on race. Sounds to me like the redefining of racism is way less about the individual and their personal beliefs as being a racist, and more about the system that is in place. And if anybody is a part of that system, they are by default racist. But speaking of abolitionists, let's take a look at slavery abolitionists like this white guy, John Brown. John Brown was an American abolitionist leader. John Brown was a leading figure in the abolitionist movement in the pre-Civil War United States. Unlike many anti-slavery activists, he was not a pacifist and believed in aggressive action against slaveholders and any government officials who enabled them. An entrepreneur who ran tannery and cattle trading businesses prior to the economic crisis of 1839, Brown became involved in the abolitionist movement following the brutal murder of Presbyterian minister and anti-slavery activist Elijah P. Lovejoy in 1837. He said at the time, "Here before God, in the presence of these witnesses, from this time I consecrate my life to the destruction of slavery." The Brown family's new home of Hudson, Ohio happened to be a key stop on the Underground Railroad, and Owen Brown, John Brown's father, became active in the effort to bring former enslaved people to freedom. The family home soon became a safe house for fugitive enslaved people. Yeah, you remember the Underground Railroad with Harriet Tubman? Sometime around 1844, she married John Tubman, a free black man. Though Tubman remained enslaved, mixed marriages were not uncommon in the region, which had a large percentage of formerly enslaved people who had received or bought their manumission. Shortly after her marriage, Araminta, known as Minty to her family, changed her name to Harriet to honor her mother. In October 1859, John Brown led a raid on the Federal Armory at Harper's Ferry, Virginia, today West Virginia, intending to start a slave liberation movement that would spread south through the mountainous regions of Virginia and North Carolina. He had prepared a provisional constitution for the revised slavery-free United States he hoped to bring about. He seized the armory, but 7 people were killed and 10 more were injured. Brown intended to arm slaves with weapons from the armory, but very few slaves joined his revolt. Within 36 hours, those of Brown's men who had not fled were killed or captured by local militia and U.S. Marines, the latter led by Robert E. Lee. Brown was hastily tried for treason against the Commonwealth of Virginia, the murder of 5 men, and inciting a slave insurrection. He was found guilty of all counts and was hanged on December 2nd, 1859, the first person executed for treason in the history of the United States. See, there's a difference between abolishing an evil act and abolishing whiteness, or a race or culture altogether. So, I leave you with this verse from Tom MacDonald's new song, Clown World.
When I was a child, the only races that we hated were the ones that we ran and didn't win. Then we stopped playing with each other, started hating on each other, started noticing the color of our skin. Christians and atheists, immigrants, patriots, we love the country, but we are not saving it. Wages don't raise to the rate of inflation, and half of the country hates all of the nation. It's funny that we think the world owes us something. All the phones got smart, but the people so dumb. We care more about the likes on a selfie than our moms, and the only time we ever speak the truth when we're drunk. We won't always agree. No, I don't hate all police. No, your thoughts and opinions ain't facts, and they are not defining my reality. No, I think picking sides divides, it's probably what has got us here. United States is great regardless, that's what we forgot in here.